today we're going to be viewing Chains of Others, which is Meursault's base ego. And I gotta say, Meursault has some of the best egos in the entirety of Limbus Company. So, let's see if his base Zayan ego lives up to the hype. Chains of Others is the base ego of Meursault. It has a Zayan level in danger. It has 19 base with plus 3 roll, blunt damage, and attack weight of 1. So, pretty decent roll in worst case scenario. 19, not bad. On hit, inflict 5 bind next turn. On hit, gain 3 bind next turn. You inflict, and then you also gain. That's the whole shtick of this ego. But you inflict more than you gain, which is good. In hit, you inflict 4 attack power down next turn, and you gain 3 attack power down next turn. Which is, right, you're obviously not going to want that, but at the same time, Meursault's IDs usually are tanks, so they're just meant to make sure that he doesn't take too much damage from the oncoming attacks, which is good. You're going to make them enemies very, very slow, and you're making yourself slow, but you're probably going to be quicker than them in this case scenario, especially if you're not running a tank ID. But this is really wants you to be running a tank ID, because on hit you gain 2 protection next turn, so this ego is encouraging you to get hit, but you're not going to be getting as hurt, because you're going to be having a lot less power on their attacks. So, pretty darn good ego, because Meursault has pretty much, like I said, mostly tank IDs. The passive of this ego is called Refusal to Judge. At the start of the combat phase, gain 3 protection if this unit is targeted by 3 or more skills. So, if you're running a solo Meursault run in Mirror Dungeons or Story or whatever it be, this is going to be a very solid passive, and well, not the best ego to use if you're running a solo, to be honest with you, but, I mean, if you're fighting a boss, actually, it's pretty decent, but if you're not, and you're fighting multiple enemies, then this passive is definitely not the best. But if you're fighting a 1v1 boss and only have Meursault, or Meursault has enemies all attacking him, then it's going to be a pretty good passive, all things considered. You're going to have to use up 10 sanity to use this ego, which is obviously most Zains, all Zains at the base cost it. And this is pretty good price, honestly, because you're going to be gaining that back if, like, you clash again and you win, which most likely you're probably going to do, because you're going to be having less pack power down on yourself than the enemy. But you also have to cough up 1 Sloth resources, 1 Gloom resource, and 2 Envy resources, which is pretty good, honestly, pretty darn good, right? Envy is nowhere near a shortage in this season, or any season recently, and Gloom, the same thing can be said. But Lust, or Sloth, I mean, Sloth usually you'll be able to get Sloth, right? It's not that hard to come by. Although, your resistances, I can't say much good about, right? I gotta say it, their Zayan resistances are pretty dog. You'll become Fatal to Lust, Fatal to Gluttony, and Endure to Pride. So, that could be good in some circumstances, like, I guess, Cromer's second form, or Cromer's first form, I think does a lot of Pride damage. So, that could be good, I suppose, but other than that, I can't say much good things about their resistances. Now, onto the drip of this ego, because we don't have a corrosion, it's a base Zayan. I like it quite a bit. Honestly, this is probably my favorite of the base Zayan drips, other than Gregor, because Gregor's arm, but that's not really the drip, that's more of, well, kinda, here or there, that's here and there. But, I really like this. It reminds me of the Rusted Chains from Library of Ruina, and all in all, it just suits him pretty well. So I gotta give that, like, a pretty solid, like, 5, 6. It's honestly matches Meursault very well, so it's gonna be a 6, which is a shocker. Like, I was not expecting any base Zayan to go above like 4, but what a shocker. Meursault takes the cake on proving me wrong. But for the strength of this ego, it's not necessarily that good. The highest it can roll isn't that high. It doesn't buff itself. It actually nerfs itself. So it's gonna go pretty low at like a whopping 1. Yeah, it's gonna go 1. It's not good for power, but it is good for usefulness. Which, if you're gonna use it for usefulness, you're gonna get a phenomenal ranking, because, well, you're buffing the enemy, but you're also buffing yourself, but you're buffing the enemy more. So you have like, what, 5, 6 sinners on the field. If one of them gets nerfed, just don't clash with them, and then your other guys will just do a lot better. So very useful. I gotta say, like 7, 8, 7. Yeah, 7's probably pretty around there. High 7 actually, maybe it's like 7.4. Yeah, 7.4 is probably very good, because it doesn't cost a lot. It does quite a bit. The only downside is if you're running a solo with him, then you're kind of crippling yourself, but any other circumstance, you're going to be, well, putting yourself up for success. But that's about it. This Ego does live up to the hype of the other Merceau Egos. I mean, he has one of the highest rolling Egos in the game, and he has one of the best healing Egos in the game. He has, in my opinion, the best damage boosting Ego in the game, which we'll cover tomorrow, and oh boy am I excited to cover that. But until then, I hope you'll have a good one, and yeah, peace.